All right, good evening, everybody. Welcome to Live Deck Building. I'm your host, BGM, or Bigger Gayer Magic. And tonight on Live Deck Building, we're looking at this thick 1/5 Rabbit Citizen Miss Bumbleflower. This thing's crazy. It's the new group hug tech that dropped with the Bloomborough precons. This thing says that whenever you cast a spell, target opponent gets to draw a card, but we put a +1/+1 counter on target creature. Doesn't have to be one of our creatures, it can be any creature, and that thing will also gain flying until end of turn. Also, if it's the second time you did this turn, you draw 2 cards. Cool, we're doing group hug, we're handing out cards to people, we're everybody's friend, but this thing is an absolute menace. Miss Bumbleflower does not make love, she gets down. And she gets down by giving things +1/+1 counters and flying. So any creature we can stuff in this deck is great. Any low drop spell we can stuff in Miss Bumbleflower is also great because we want to get to that second spell trigger. Let's see what we got for viewer suggestions. Hey Chest Paints, how's it going? BGM is, thank you Chest Paints, that's really nice of you. Alright, so I like things that provide a lot of value. One of my favorite news cycles of cards is the Overlord cycle from the Duskmord expansion. The Overlords all have multiple triggers. They all do things whenever they enter and when they attack. Yeah. Overlord. We can run 3 of them. There's 1 for each color. Let's look at the blue one. The blue one's a 5-drop. It's a 5/3 that flies. It's got Impending 4, which is like Suspend, except while the thing isn't a creature, when the thing enters the battlefield, it's an enchantment. It's on the battlefield. It just ain't a creature until all the suspend counters are gone. This thing says whenever it ATBs or attacks, we draw 2 cards and discard a card. It's great. It's like a double loot on something we can keep doing over and over and over and over again. It's really cool. I really love the Overlord series. They are coming down in price. They used to hang out around $10. I'm happy to see them coming down. We got our first suggestion. It is Consecrated Sphinx. Let's talk about Consecrated Sphinx. Consecrated Sphinx is actually a card very near and dear to my heart. One time at a Magic Con when I was still living in Washington State, one of my best friends did an Hours of Devastation sealed event with me, and we opened a Consecrated Sphinx in the Masterpiece foil, and he gave it to me. And I cherish it to this day. My Consecrated Sphinx doesn't look like whatever the hell mess this is going on, though. This thing's a secret lair. Consecrated Sphinx is a flying sphinx that says whenever an opponent draws a card, we don't got to, but we may draw 2 cards, which is pretty cool. It gives us twice the card advantage over our opponents will have. It's great. It's a flying body. It can be a flying blocker, but mostly it's just going to draw you all the cards you need to win a game. It's great, and that's why this thing hangs out around $42. Recommend playtesting a proxy before you actually purchase this thing. Great suggestion, Vash. I appreciate it. Hey, Buffer, how's it going? I'm just listening to On the Shadows. I'm working right now. Anyways, take a lurk. Bigger. Hey, thank you, Carlitos. I hope you're having a good day, Carlitos. Thanks for popping by. All right, y'all. Let's see. I'm sure it's very beautiful. Okay. Can you guys hear me okay on TikTok? Hello. Can you guys hear me all right on TikTok? Put me in the deck, King. I would be amazing. Blake, I'd put you in the deck if I could. Blake, would you be a 2/2 bear, or would you be a 1/1 twink citizen? I'm sorry if that was mean. It's good to see you, Blake. Do you have any suggestions for Miss Bumbleflower tonight? I like the Overlord series. We looked at the blue one. We're gonna look at the white one. The white one's cool because it makes little flying tokens. Yeah, we got that Overlord of the Mistmoors right here. It has that impending thing we talked about a few cards ago. But this thing, instead of drawing us cards on ETB and attacks, it makes us little flying insects. And the insects are 2/1s and they fly. It's great. It spits out a board. If you are familiar with Malevolent Hermit over on TikTok, I played a game with him, and this thing almost won me the game. It was great. Anything that keeps doing things and keeps giving you value off of entering the battlefield and attacking, because that's what you really want to do with a creature, right? You want it to enter the battlefield, you want it to attack, and you want it to sometimes block. And this thing does extra things when you do those things. That's why it's 15 bucks. That blue one we saw was hanging around $7. This thing's hanging around about 15. I think they are still going down, but I'm not positive. Do we have any? Cast through time. Red Lemming, it's so good to see you, Red Lemming. You want us to cast through time? Cast through time is not a card I'm familiar with, but it's blue, it's 7 mana, it's an enchantment, it's $3, and instant sorcery spells you control have rebound. 10, great suggestion, yo. Okay, this thing's very cool. Rebound is a very powerful effect, but it's a little wordy. It means that we exile the spell as it resolves, but we get to cast a version of the spell for free at the beginning of our upkeep. So it's cool. We get 2 versions of the spell. It can be a little tricky with timing, but it's really good. It's a good time. Thank you, Brandon, for the follow. I appreciate it. I'm BGM. I'm a video editor and streamer. I make silly little Magic the Gathering content all over the internet. We're talking about caster time because it got suggested for tonight's Commander, Miss Bumbleflower. If you have a suggestion, please put it in the comments. This thing's cool. So Rebound is going to help us get that second spell trigger off Miss Bumbleflower, and we'll be able to place down more counters and give more things flying. It's that flying keyword that really does it for me off Miss Bumbleflower triggers. It's what really takes her over the edge, because she looks really innocuous at first glance, right? She's like, oh, she'll give your opponent's cards, and like she puts 1 counter down at a time, but no, she draws you multiple cards, and she gives the thing flying. It's the flying until end of turn. Thank you very much, Josh, for the follow. I appreciate it. Yeah, that's cast through time. What we got? What's our next suggestion? Miss Bumbledonk. It is Miss Bumbledonk, user 784. Just building a Bumbleflower. Homunculus Horde is goated. Let's talk about Homunculus Horde. Hey Duh wants us to run the Homunculus Horde. I think this thing came out in Foundations. Please correct me if I'm wrong. Homunculus Horde, it's blue. It's like got an X on it, right? Homunculus Horde. We're looking for there it is. Homunculus Horde. It's a 4-drop. Whenever you draw your second card each turn, you create a token that's a copy of this creature. 10 out of 10 suggested, honestly, because we're going to be doing incremental value things the whole time we're playing Miss Bumbleflower. We get triggers to make our creatures a little bit bigger and give them flying until end of turn. And yeah, this thing, we're going to be drawing that second card a lot. As long as we can get 2 spells and reliably draw cards off Miss Bumbleflower, that's the whole goal, is casting multiple spells per turn. And this thing will just make copies of 2/2, and the copies will Fibonacci out, right? Because the copies are this creature. So the first time you trigger it, it's going to make a second one. And then you have 2 of them, and then they will double into 4, into 8, and they'll Fibonacci out, and you'll have a silly amount of little 2/2s. This thing feels a little bit like a blue Scoot Swarm, but it's a lot slower. Also notable about the way this is worded. If you can draw multiple cards on other people's turns, it'll trigger. How silly is that? Great suggestion, Hayda. I appreciate it. It's in the deck list. If you guys want to see what cards we're putting in the deck list, please check out the Moxfield page. The Moxfield page is linked to the link tree in the TikTok. All right, Paper Gabe wants us to run that Abzan Falconer. I like Abzan Falconer. This thing was printed in, I don't think it was originally printed in the Atraxa Precon, but it sure was an include in the Atraxa Precon, the OG one from like 10 years ago. It's a 3-mana white human soldier for 40 cents with Outlast, and it also says each creature you control with a +1/+1 counter on it has flying. It's great. It gives your board a meaningful keyword in the form of flying, giving your creatures evasion, giving you the ability to kill your opponents, and also be able to block their big scary dragons. Flying is a pretty meaningful keyword. If you have a deck without at least like 1 flyer in it, like your deck needs to fly. It needs to fly in some kind of way. It doesn't need to fly all the time, but you will just get dragoned on at the commander table if you don't have a flying blocker. And this thing will make your board flying. Great suggestion. Also, because we can distribute +1/+1 counters super easily off Miss Bumbleflower. Great suggestion. Okay, good to see you, Dream Demon. Forced Fruition. Let's talk about that Forced Fruition. I don't remember exactly what this card does, but it did get a reprint in the Enchanting Tales in the Wilds of Eldraine about a year or 2 ago. This thing says, oh, did you all get my voice crack? Someone please clip that on Twitch, please. Whenever an opponent casts a spell, that player draws 7 cards. That's crazy. So this thing is gonna just make our turn so long. That's so many cards to go through. We really need some kind of no max hand size effect if we want to run something like this, in my personal opinion. Because figuring out, like, if you don't have that max hand size effect, and you're, like, casting 2 spells to get that Bumbleflower trigger just to do what the deck does to function, and then you're drawing an additional 14 cards on top of it, That's gonna be so long to sift through your hand for discard. I don't want to sit through that. Run no max hand size, please. But other than that, this thing's only $1. It's 6 mana, and once it's on the field and you get it to trigger once or twice, you probably have enough cards to close the game. Probably, I imagine. I would imagine, right? Very cool suggestion. Zephyrinho Chum adds Suppressor Skyguard. Let's talk about Suppressor Skyguard. Suppressor Skyguard. Suppressor Skyguard. Okay, this art's rad. This thing was printed in the Clue expansion, and even I don't remember that thing. This is a 4-drop little Azorius human knight, and the art's very cool. It's a 2/4 flyer. Whenever a player attacks you, if that player has another opponent who isn't being attacked, prevent all combat damage that would be dealt to you this combat. I love this. Okay, so this thing is $13 because it's amazing. It's so good. It is a stacks piece. It is undeniably a stacks piece, but I normally hate stacks pieces, but this feels really funny to me, right? Because like this just simply is commander politics on the table, right? It's so whenever a player attacks you, that player doesn't damage you if they're not attacking other people they could have attacked. That's amazing. This thing's amazing. How have we not seen this so far? All right, that's crazy. Who put that Suppressor Skyguard in here? Suppressor Zephyrinho Chum. That excellent suggestion. It's not often that I see a card I don't recognize, and that was exciting. Great suggestion, Zephyrinho. I appreciate it. All right, I see you, pup. Let's talk about Trouble in Pairs. Trouble in Pairs is actually a controversial card if you did not know it. Not just because it's a game changer, but because it was supposedly the art for this card was plagiarized. You can Google it. Yeah, this is a little controversial, and it's also like a prominent card in Commander. Like this thing has been out for less than a year, and it already made the Game Changers list. This thing's $40, 4-drop mono white enchantment. It came out in one of the Murders at Karlov Manor precons. This thing says if an opponent would begin an extra turn, that player skips that turn instead. And whenever an opponent attacks you with 2 or more creatures, draws their second card each turn, or casts their second spell, we get to draw ourselves a card. So this thing provides white card advantage in a good way, honestly. Towards the late game of Commander game, people are going to be casting 2 spells per turn easy, and this thing will draw you multiple cards. Also, if they attack you, it'll draw you a card. So it's going to draw you a bunch of cards, but also in a CEDH format, or in a sweaty format, as I would personally describe it, where people are taking extra turns, this just turns that shit off, and that's pretty cool. And again, it was printed in a precon. And it's controversial. Ooh, we have not seen Glunch yet, James. Let's talk about Glunch. Glunch is cool. Glunch is another group hug card. Glunch is a hard word to... All right, here, we found Glunch. Glunch is a flurmph from the D&D universe, but Glunch himself is a legendary 0/5. He is a jellyfish in the Magic universe, but in D&D, he's a flurmph. At the beginning of your end step, choose a player. They put 2+1/+1 counters on a creature they control, and then we choose a different player to draw a card, and then we choose a third player to create 2 treasure tokens. So Glunch is well beloved within the Commander format. He's admittedly a not good card. He's not good. If you want to do group hug, he is simply outclassed by Miss Bumbleflower outright. But if you are committed to the group hug strategy, Glunch will do multiple things for multiple people each turn. He can buy you multiple favors. If I was running Glunch, though, I kind of feel like... depending on the deck, the 2+1/+1 counters and the treasure tokens are really valuable. I don't know. It does different things for different people. Also, he's beautiful, and you can't tell me I'm wrong. Yeah, that's Glunch. Great suggestion. Okay, Rainbow Putzer wants us to cut a deal. Cut a deal! Let's cut a deal. Cut a Deal is a white card. It's a sorcery. It's 3 mana. It looks like it's from the Bloomborough precon that Miss Bumbleflower was printed in. And each opponent draws a card. Then you draw a card for each opponent who drew a card this way. Fair, balanced. I like it. It's very fair. It's very, like, white card draw. You're drawing a card. Other people are drawing a card. You maybe draw an additional card or 2. It's cool. Also, it forces your opponents to draw, so if you care about forcing draws on your opponents, this thing will do that. But I'm not sure why you would want to do that in white. Alright, let's take one from Twitch. Alright, we got All right, so Pup Maestro, we saw Consecrated Sphinx. It was actually the first suggestion of the night. So we're gonna do a Master of Ceremonies from Paper Gabe. Thank you very much for hanging out with me, though, Pup Maestro. Let's talk about a Master of Ceremonies. So Master of Ceremonies is kind of like an engine piece. It's a 4-drop. It was printed in one of the, not Strixhaven, the new Capenna precons. This thing says at the beginning of your upkeep, each opponent chooses money, friends, or secrets. For each player who chose money, you and that player each create a treasure token. For the people who chose friends, we each get a 1/1. And for each person who chose secrets, we and them draw a card. It's cool. It's $14. It is group hug, but the thing I don't love about this thing is it's wordy as hell. You have to explain it probably multiple times, probably to the point where you're just handing people the card, and that kind of slows down a game. But other than that, it's very white good stuff. This thing probably is like a house in a mono white deck because it provides multiple forms of value depending on what your opponents are picking, and that's good. It's undeniably a good card. I just don't love how wordy it is. I really wish that they, like, instead of just choosing, like, friends, money, or secrets for flavor, I wish they just said each person chooses, like, a treasure, a card, or a token. I wish it was just that, so it was less wordy. But that's just me personally. I'm willing to take that hit to flavor. Alright, Vash the Desk Queen. Let's get Bunny Cop. Bunny Cop popularized by... Bunny Cop is the nickname for Quain based on the Commander's Quarters. He's a popular YouTuber. He does a lot of budget Commander decks with high-quality editing. Shout out to him. Quain Iterant Meddler is a 2-drop Azorius 50-cent 1/3 Rabbit Wizard with an activated ability that says we tap our boy Quain, and each player may draw a card, and then each player who drew a card this way gains 1 life. He's also a group hug card. He's very cool. He has a little bit of a bad rep, though, because he's the only group hug card in his group hug deck in most times. Mostly he's just there for value in card draw for the Azorius player, and he's running enough interaction and counter spells that your card draw is kind of negated off the rabbit. That's been my experience with Quain, at least. He's very cool. If we want to do rabbit tribal in these colors, Quain is a rabbit. Boy Hole Snake, thank you very much for the follow. Let's talk about Grand Abolisher. That is a nickname I wish I registered in my, like, fully in my mind before I said it out loud, Mr. Snake. But thanks for hanging out with me. I appreciate it. I am BGM, or Bigger Gayer Magic. I'm a video editor and streamer, and on lives, we do community deck building. We're building Miss Bumbleflower tonight, and if you want to suggest any cards for Miss Bumbleflower, please put them in the comments. If you see your card over here, it'll be put into a Moxfield deck list, and you can check out all the cards we talked about today in the Moxfield deck list in the link tree. And if you want to hang out with a bunch of big gay nerds who play Commanders on the weekend, join the Bigger Gayer Discord. This is Grand Abolisher. It's a white for a $17 2/2 human cleric, and during your turn, your opponents can't cast spells or activated abilities of artifacts, creatures, or enchantments. It's wild. It is a hardcore stacks piece in white. Like, when people think of white, they think of this card. It's a very well-known card, and it stops people from interacting with you during your turn. It's great. I think my Rel Shield of Argive is like a commander that has this that also cares about soldiers on top of being legendary. This thing's wild. I am kind of glad that I am seeing this card less and less personally in my pods. I don't see this card often, and I'm really thankful for that. I don't super duper love stacks pieces or things that prevent people from playing the game in a meaningful way. And that's just my personal commander vibe. I am not telling anybody how to play, but that's just me. I just picked up to Depopulate, and it seems really fun. Okay, let's talk about Depopulate. I really hope it's in this colors. If it's not in this color, it's in the colors. It's from, not Strixhaven, it's from New Capenna. Each player who controls a multicolored creature draws a card, and then we destroy all creatures. So we got a little 4-drop board wipe in mono white. It's 50 cents. Yeah, so we can draw a card and we destroy all creatures. It's a 4-drop board wipe at sorcery speed. That's a really aggressive rate of mana for white, and we're helping people draw cards, but honestly, we're playing Miss Bumbleflower. We're already giving people cards. I don't really mind that at all. In fact, that's just kind of on theme for tonight. And it's an aggressively costed 4-drop sorcery board wipe. This is perfectly playable, and if it's the second spell we cast that turn, like let's say we have a problem on the board and we need to wipe, We can cast this thing as our second spell, Miss Bumbleflower or Trigger, and then the board we wipe, and we'll be up maybe 2 or 3 cards. It's actually, I like it. The more I talk about it, the more I like it. Also, it's only 50 cents. Let's see how much. Is it Damnation or is it Damn? I think it's Damnation. Is that the black one? Wrath of God. Wrath of God. Wrath of God is like the colloquial. Yeah, this thing is 10 times the amount of mana. It stops them from being regenerated, which is a keyword that used to be more relevant. But yeah, this thing is just worse than that last card. I like that one better. Thank you for the suggestion. Ooh, you want us to run that Narset Parter of Veils? Unfortunately, Narset is not in our color identity tonight, Zombie, but I'm so happy to see you, Zombie. Alright, Dream Demon, what you got? You want us to run that? I like Scrawling Crawler. Scrawling Crawler came out in Foundations. It's a 3-drop. And shoulder decks love this thing. This is a $7 3-drop 3/2 Phyrexian Construct. At the beginning of your upkeep, each player draws a card. Great, we're drawing more cards, we're helping our opponents, we're doing Miss Bumbleflower things, but whenever an opponent draws a card, they lose 1 life, and now our Bumbleflower triggers sting just an itty-bitty bit for those people drawing a card. I love this thing. This thing, I opened one, and I play it in a deck I play often, and it often draws removal. Even at high life totals, people remove this thing. They don't want to pay life to draw cards. I personally don't think this thing is worth a lot of removal, unless you're picking up large chunks of your deck at a time. Honestly, I'm okay losing like 15 life to this thing in the early game. I don't think this thing is worth removal, unless we're in like a Shouldered deck. How do you guys feel? Oh, Narset is mono blue. My mistake. Narset, you're talking about the mean Narset. You're talking about Stax Narset. Okay, let's talk about Stax Narset. Stax Narset came out in the War of the Spark set. The War of the Spark set had an abundance of Planeswalkers. And this 3-drop, 5 loyalty, uncommon Planeswalker Narset says that each opponent can't draw more than 1 card each turn. Womp womp. This thing's mean as hell. This is another one of those cards that, like, if the deck doesn't absolutely need this specific card for some reason, I don't play this card. This card, personally, in my play groups, once again, I'm not telling anybody how to play. I'm just saying that this thing brings up some bad feelings for people, and it is one of those cards that can kind of prevent people from playing. Because, like, let's say you have a way to draw cards, and you draw the 1 card, and it's a land, and then your other spell is a draw card spell, and you can't do anything. You're locked out of the game, kind of. That feels bad. Feels bad. And also, Narset has a chunky 5 loyalty, so she's and she comes out on turn 3. I don't know. I don't know. It's a little mean for me. It's a little mean for my personal taste, but it is undoubtedly a good deck, especially if you're trying to build like a little bit more cutthroat Miss Bumbleflower, because this thing just turns off card draw. Like, if you want to get that second spell trigger and you pick the person you picked first the second time, they're not drawing a second card. They just get the 1 and you get your 2. That's undeniably a good rate, but I don't know. It's a little mean in my opinion. All right, you want us to run that Orzhov Advocist? Orzhov Advocist. Orzhov Advocist. Orzhov Advocist. Orzhov Advocist, this thing, 3-drop, 40 cent, 1/4, printed in the Atraxa Precon originally. At the beginning of your upkeep, each player may put 2 +1/+1 counters on a creature they control. If that player does, creatures that player controls can attack us or planeswalkers we control until our next turn. This thing's cool. Commander games can last a long time. I'm sure you guys in the chat know. But this thing can turn off attacks. In the late game, this is a lot more impactful than it is. Like, people will take that trigger to make their Voltron commander a little bit bigger, and then they'll forget they can't attack you, and then they'll be like, I'll try to attack you, and I'll be like, you made that dark deal with me. You wanted to make your thing a little thicker. You wanted them counters, and now you can't attack me for like half an hour. Yeah, it's cool. Also, it does it every turn. Alright. Mind Skinner. You're looking at the Mind Skinner, Ancient Bronze Dragon, the Folio of... That's fat. Okay, we'll talk about the Mind Skinner. Mind Skinner, 3 blue, blue. Excuse me, blue, 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 3 blue pips. 10-1. It's a 10-1. It's a nightmare. It can't be blocked. And if a source you control would deal damage to an opponent, prevent that damage, and each opponent mills that many cards. So this is the new blue mill commander that came out in the Duskmourn expansion. A lot of people are very excited about this thing. I have not seen it on the battlefield. Have you guys? I'm not an arena person. I heard this thing is pretty good in arena, especially because it only does one-on-one formats. Mill is a lot more viable in one-on-one formats, I hear. I'm a dirty commander player, so I only play with multiple friends at a time. This thing simply feels like a really great mill card. I'm sure it goes great in that that mono blue. What are the Orzhov? Not the filibuster. Persistent Petitioners. Yeah, that's right. That's the card I'm looking for. Persistent Petitioners. Let's talk about a Finale of Revelation. The Finale of Revelation sounds blue to me. Printed in... I want to say this was also printed in... This was in the Modern Horizons 3 pre-con. I don't think it was originally printed there, but this sorcery for X and 2 blue says that we draw X cards. If X is 10 or more, instead shuffle your graveyard into your library, draw X cards, untap up to 5 lands, and then you have no maximum hand size for the rest of the game, and we exile the Finale of Revelation so we can't chain it together to make infinite mana and draw a bunch of cards. Okay, cool. Yeah. So we dump all our mana into this thing in the late game. We untap and draw a bunch of cards. It's great. Also, if we only do X equal to 1 to get multiple spells, that also feels fine to me. We draw a card. Yeah. 10 of Heir Apparent. You want us to run a Heir Apparent? Okay, so Heir Apparent. Let's talk about Relentless cards. Relentless cards is the community term for any card that you can have any number of copies of in a deck. It's named for Relentless Rats, which I believe was the original one. Someone in the comments, please correct me if I'm wrong. Yeah, but it was a 3-drop little rat that you could have a bunch of rats of, and they buffed each other proportionate to the amount of rats you got. So far, we now have a Relentless card in every color. White has 2, I think black has 3. But Heir Apparent is the second one. It came out in Bloomburrow. When this thing enters, create a number of rabbit creature tokens equal to the number of other creatures you control, named Heir Apparent. A deck can have any number of cards named Heir Apparent. So you want to stuff as many Heir Apparents in your deck as possible. Keep popping them out. You make a big board of rabbits. You give them all, like, I don't know, +1/+1 is probably all you need when you have 30 rabbits. And then you just run over the board with all your bunnies. All right. Yeah, Elish Norn. Yeah, let's talk about Mommy, Mother of Machines. Elish Norn, Mother of Machines, community name Mother or Mommy, is a 5-drop Phyrexian Praetor. It has some kind of keyword that I can't read because Moxfield always brings these cards up in Phyrexian, which I hate. This thing doubles your enter the battlefield effects, and it turns off enter the battlefield effects for your opponents. It's great. It's $33. The art is very cool. Straight people are horny for this creature. It's cool. It's expensive. It doubles your ETBs. It's great for Heir Apparent. Let's talk about Crawl Space. Crawl Space is a 3-drop, $6 colorless artifact. No more than 2 creatures can attack you each combat. Okay, so we are actually seeing a lot of stacks pieces this live. Excuse me. I have a cold. Yeah, we're seeing a lot of stacks pieces this live. That's fine. If you want to play stacks, that's fine. I'm not here to shame you, but this isn't for me personally. But if your deck cares about making like a Voltron creature, so you have one thing that you attack with, this feels really cool because you want to do single combat anyway. Running effects like this, I don't know. Just to run them to slow down our opponents, I don't know. It's not for me. This has nothing to do with the deck. I'm about to make a rat colony deck with Totemtaz. Is Totemtaz the Grixis rat from Bloomburrow? Alright, Vash wants us to run... oh, wait. Paper Gabe. We'll do Vash after. Min white. I like Min. Min is cool. Min is mono blue. Min's like $20. Oh no, she's only $9. She came down. She is a legendary gnome wizard. She's a gnome wizard 1/3. Whenever you draw your second card each turn, you create a 1/1 blue illusion creature token with this creature gets +1/+0 for each other illusion you control. And whenever illusion you control dies, you may put a permanent card with mana value less than or equal to that creature's power from your hand onto the battlefield. I love Min. Min is a super fun mono blue deck, mostly because it's running a bunch of permanents and not counter spells, but also it's super fun. It makes you a bunch of illusions. She's just like a wild girly with her animal friends adventuring about the forest as a little gnome wizard. She came out in the D&D pre-con. She's $10, and her tokens are proportionately more powerful the more you have. It's very cool. It also shits out free permanents from your hand when they die. I like it a lot. I wish it was a little cheaper. I think this thing was $20 at one point. All right, let's get back to it. Faramir, Prince of somewhere in Lord of the Rings. Faramir from Lord of the Rings. Oh, it has to be the right Faramir because there's like 5 versions of every Lord of the Rings card. Let's talk about Faramir, Prince of this place. It's a 4-drop Azorius 3/3 human noble. With an at the beginning of your end step trigger, we choose an opponent, and at the beginning of that opponent's next end step, we draw a card if they didn't attack us, and otherwise, we create 3 1/1 human soldier creature tokens. Okay, so we got another politic-y card, another wordy trigger. It's a little, I don't know, it's a little wordy. It gives us an end step, we pick somebody, we want them to attack us if we want to make tokens, but if we don't want them to attack us, we draw a card. So either it's going to help us draw more cards, or it's going to help us make a board. I like it. It's 50 cents. It's a 3/3 that hangs on the battlefield. It's 4 mana. Our deck's going to easily get to 4 mana, because we only need to get to 4 mana to get to Bumbleflower. 4 mana fits really great into a late game mana curve that we can put multiple spells in. Like a 4-drop and a 3-drop, or like a 4-drop and a 2-drop fits really great into like a turn 5 or 6 mana curve, because we want to get multiple spells because of Miss Bumbleflower's triggers. Yeah, this thing's cool. It'll also give us multiple cards if people decide to not attack us throughout the course of a turn, as long as we, throughout the course of a game, as long as we pick the right player. Like maybe we pick a blue deck that doesn't do a whole lot of attacking if we want to draw cards, or maybe we pick the aggro deck if we want to make a bunch of guys. Ooh, Frost Ace wants us to run that Chasm Skulker. Chasm Skulkers too. Chasm Skulker is a cool card. It's another one of those blue cards that can suddenly make you a big blue board. This thing is a 3-drop for a $1.50, 1/1. Whenever you draw a card, we get to slam a +1/+1 counter on Chasm Skulker. And when Chasm Skulker dies, we make that many 1/1 blue squid creature tokens with Island Walk. Island Walk means that if our opponents control an island, they can't block our squids. It's pretty cool. I like it a lot. I ran it in my Locust God deck that ran a bunch of cards, and it's really cool to have it on the battlefield and just kind of let it hang out and hope for a board wipe. Because if they wipe the board, your Chasm Skulker dies, you suddenly have a bunch of island walking squids. You seem to be coming out pretty good on the other side of that board wipe. Also, it synergizes with +1/+1 counters, and Miss Bumbleflower can slam +1/+1 counters. Chasm Skulker is going to get kind of big. And Bumbleflower can give it flying. Actually, the more I talk about it, the better it is for Bumbleflower. That's probably why they put it in the pre-con that Miss Bumbleflower is printed in. Thank you so much, Zero, for the follow, and thank you, S, for the follow. I appreciate it. I'm BGM, or Bigger Gator Magic. I use green screen effects to make silly little Magic the Gathering videos all over the internet. And on lives, we do live deck building. If you want to suggest a card for Miss Bumbleflower, please feel free to put it in the comments. If you see it over here, it'll be put into a Moxfield deck list that you guys can see via the link tree on my TikTok profile. And if you want to play Spell Table, which is paper magic, over webcam with a bunch of gay nerds on the weekend, you can join the Bigger Gator Discord. Thanks for hanging out with me. Let's talk about Dream Trawler. It's a 6-drop Azorius 3/5. It's a flying lifelinker, and whenever you draw a card, Dream Trawler gets +1/+0 until end of turn. And whenever Dream Crawler attacks, we draw a card, making it an attacking 4/5. And discard a card at instant speed, activated ability, discard a card. It gains hexproof until end of turn, and then we tap it. It's cool. It's got lifelink. And we can make it bigger with Miss Bumbleflower. We can cast spells in our first main phase to get the triggers off it, to make it a little bit bigger. Excuse me, to get the triggers off Miss Bumbleflower, to make Dream Trawler bigger. I understand that Dream Trawler made waves in Standard during its time. I am unfortunately not not anything but a commander player, to tell you the truth. I like it. I think the art is really cool. Like you can almost kind of like feel that tactile feeling of it like grazing the cloud. I really enjoy the art. I have one. It lives in a binder. It's hard to find a place for it. The mana cost is a little weird for me. I don't know. Do you think I should play it? Do you like it? Do you run it? Otherworld Atlas. What the heck is an Otherworld Atlas? Otherworld Atlas, suggested by Derpington Steel. Great name, Derpington Steel. Let's talk about the Otherworld Atlas. It's a colorless $3 colorless 4 mana $3 artifact with 2 activated abilities. One to put a charge counter on it, and the second one, for each player draws a card for each charge counter on Otherworldly Atlas. Oh, excuse me, guys. Alright, this thing's cool. We got Group Hug. This thing is not aggressively costed. This thing feels like a very fair commander card to me. We pay 4 mana, it enters the battlefield, we put a counter on it, and maybe we draw a card off it eventually. I feel like this thing, so like let's talk it out, right? So this thing comes out on turn 4, hits the battlefield, and we put a charge counter on it. Let's move to turn 5. We either choose to put another charge counter on it, or we let everyone draw 1 card. If we want to really get that second card draw trigger, and maybe Miss Bumbleflower is removed and we're in an awkward place for mana, this thing can help us get that second card draw trigger. We haven't seen other permanents in this deck, in this card list, that do care about getting that second draw trigger, and if Miss Bumbleflower isn't available, this thing can get us there, but it kinda is slow, in my opinion. If we had a way to proliferate the counters on it, this thing would go ham, though. Alright, has anyone said approach of the second? Oh my god, ew! Ew, everyone shame Zombie Kidney for his suggesting an Approach of the Second Sun. I'm only teasing Zombie. Let's talk about Approach of the Second Sun. So Approach of the Second Sun is an alternate win con in mono white. It's a 7-drop sorcery. If Approach of the Second Sun was cast from your hand, and you've cast another spell named Approach of the Second Sun this game, you win the game. Otherwise, put Approach of the Second Sun into its owner's library 7th from the top, and you gain 7 life. So, a lot of dirtily Azorius decks, and just dirtily decks that can't win the game through combat or conventional means, will run an Approach of the Second Sun. It's not, I don't know, I've never won with it. I don't know if it would be fun to win with it for me personally. The way I have seen people win with it in a way that feels unfun to me is when people copy it. So that they win the game immediately when they cast it, and they do that by copying this thing. I don't particularly like that. I don't like things that end the game. Like now, like I have my 2 magic cards. I've assembled a Zodia, but he's only 2 people, or he's only 2 pieces, and I slam him on the battlefield, and now the game's over. That's normally what I see with Approach of the Second Sun. That's been my experience. That's not for me. But if you want to honest to goodness cast your Approach of the Second Sun, dig through 7 cards of your library, and do it like as God intended, I respect that. I respect that. That's perfectly fine for me, in my personal gay opinions. Alright, let's talk about Burgeoning. The T-Beard wants us to run that Burgeoning. Burgeoning. Burgeoning is a 1-drop expensive mono green enchantment, and I think it's like $40. Oh, it's $43. Whenever an opponent plays a land, we may put a land from our hand onto the battlefield. It's crazy. If we have no max hand size and we are just drawing, we're just picking up chunks of our deck with a Miss Bumbleflower deck. Our deck wants to draw cards, slam lands, ramp, and put out a ton of spells. Burgeoning can do that. Also, it's 1 mana, so it fits really great into the mana curve to get that second spell trigger off of Miss Bumbleflower. It's great. It's undeniably so good. But Josh Lee Kwai on the Command Zone said that, like, it's not really worth $40. It's not. In my personal opinion, no. You could run a 50-cent card that says you can play 3 lands during your turn. That's like 3 mana and not spend $40. If you're a proxy CDH pod, more power to you. I don't know. It's a lot. I think it was also reprinted in the Estrid Planeswalker Enchantment Bant Precon a few years ago. I have a copy of it, and I'm pretty sure that's where mine came from. Alright, let's talk about Dismiss into Dream. Alright, let's talk about Dismiss into Dream. Dismiss into Dream. Uh-oh. I put too many S's in there, just like a... Just like someone who puts too many S's in there. Let's talk about Dismiss into Dream. It's a 7-mana mono blue enchantment, and this thing is $1.50. Each creature your opponents control is an illusion in addition to its other types, and it has whenever this creature becomes the target of a spell or ability, sacrifice it. So, we saw Min quite a few cards ago. Min is like the illusion, mono blue illusion commander, and her illusions all buff each other proportionate to the amount of illusions you control. And this thing would be great in that deck. No, that thing affects our opponents. This thing's amazing. This thing is like a one-sided mono black thing that there's something in mono black that does something very similar, but it's symmetric in black. This thing just is one-sided. So anything that we can target our opponents with just gets sacrificed. That's crazy. This is crazy. That's crazy. It makes your opponent's creatures so fragile. Oh my god, and we can kill them with Miss Bumbleflower. We can kill their creatures with Miss Bumbleflower, because Miss Bumbleflower puts +1/+1 counters on them. When we put +1/+1 counters on them, they die. Oh my god, who put this in here? Who put this in here? This is amazing. How have I not seen... Jay Schwab, this is for you. This is another banger of a card. I can't believe I've never seen this thing before. It is so cool. It makes your opponent's creatures so fragile, and on Miss Bumbleflower's triggers, whenever we plop down a +1/+1 counter, they pop the creature. How sick is that? Alright, Frost Ace, I see you. Let's talk about Primal Vigor. If we want to be fair and balanced, and we want to double up our tokens and maybe our counters, we run a Primal Vigor over a doubling season, because Primal Vigor is the people's doubling season. This thing is a 5-drop mono green enchantment. This version is $9. It's the Marvel version from the Black Panther Secret Lair. If one or more tokens would be created, twice the many of those tokens are created instead. That's everybody. That's also your opponents. If one or more +1/+1 counters would be put on a creature, twice that many +1/+1 counters are put on that creature instead. That's also your opponents too. So if they're doing tokens and +1/+1 counters, watch out. All right, Recon, good to see you, dude. How are you doing? Let's talk about an Instrument of the Bard. Recon over on Twitch, my friend there, wants us to run that Instrument of the Bard. Brinstrument of the Bard. Instrument of the Bard sounds like it came out in the D&D expansion. Instrument of the Bard, it sure did. Instrument of the Bard, legendary 1-drop green artifact, already off the bat, 10 out of 10 suggestion. It's a single mana spell, which means it's going to help us get to that second Miss Bumbleflower trigger. This thing's got an activated ability though, and it says, at the beginning of your upkeep, you may put a Harmony counter on the Instrument of the Bards. Has an activated ability, pay 4 mana, search your library for a creature card with mana value equal to the number of the Harmony counters on Instrument of the Bards. Reveal it and put it into your hand. If that card is legendary, we get a treasure. It is so good. If we get our little legendaries and we know our deck really good, we can ramp off this thing, making its activated ability actually like 3 mana. It's cool. It's a single mana, so it's gonna help us get that Miss Bumbleflower trigger. And it keeps putting relevant cards in our hand, right? Because we can search for whatever we want to as long as we got enough verse counters. And we are going to be running a bunch of low drop spells because we want them Miss Bumbleflower triggers. Great suggestion. Also, it's only 50 cents. Oh my god, I never even thought about that, Deathcore Dad, your name has a very good mouthfeel. Alright, Seedborn Muse and the Leyline of Anticipation Art Master. Let's talk about a Seedborn Muse first. Seedborn Muse is a card, and it's kind of CDH-y. It's a little sweaty in my opinion. It's $13, it's 5 mana, it's a spirit, and it says untap all permanents you control during each other player's untap step. And Seedborn Muse is really just a gateway to you having a turn whenever your opponents have a turn. It's often run with this thing that Art Master suggested called the Leyline of Anticipation. It's a good way for you to get a turn every time your opponents get a turn, because this thing gives your spells flash, meaning that you can just do things when your opponents do. I personally don't like the vibes of doing that, because you will be monopolizing the entire table's time. But if you're there to win, that will undoubtedly win you the game. But if you're there to hang out with your friends and have a good time, taking a turn for every single one of their turns, which is what you're doing with these two cards, in my opinion, kind of bad vibes. But if you want to win, you can win that way, for sure. It's like doubling season, but affordable. Willbreaker. Willbreaker is a mean. Oh my god, Willbreaker goes absolutely disgusting. So I play Spell Table, which is paper magic over webcam with my Bigger Gator Discord server, link in the link tree. And someone pulled out a Willbreaker on me over the weekend, and they dominated the game for a quick second. Willbreaker is this little 5-drop. It's three. Oh my god, this card's only $3. That's pretty cool. I love when upsetting things are cheap and available to everybody. This thing says whenever a creature an opponent controls becomes the target of a spell or ability you control, we get it. We just gain control of it for as long as we got our Willbreaker. And I don't know, let's look over here at Miss Bumbleflower over here, who puts +1/+1 counters on target creature. So if we got Willbreaker and we got Miss Bumbleflower, we have a little effect over here that says whenever we cast a spell, we give somebody a card, we put a +1/+1 counter on a creature and we take it. And now it's ours for as long as we got Willbreaker. It's disgusting. It is so good. I like it though, honestly. In a Miss Bumbleflower deck, if this is like the top end of power, if this is the meanest shit you're doing, honestly, I'm here for it. I am so down. I think that Mr. Willbreaker actually belongs in here. I am so sorry if your pronouns are she, her, Mr. Willbreaker. All right, what do we got? What else we got next? We got a Nils Discipline Enforcer. Expected Loss, cool name. Nils Discipline Enforcer. Well, let's talk about Nils Discipline Enforcer. He's mono white. He's 3 mana. He's a 2/2. He's $7. He's a human cleric. And at the beginning of your end step, for each player, put a +1/+1 counter up to 1 target creature that player controls. And each creature with 1 or more counters on it can't attack you or planeswalkers you control unless its controller plays X, where X is the number of counters on the creature. I love this. Did we talk about Miss Bumbleflower yet? She puts counters wherever the hell she wants to. And this will say, this is kind of like a Ghostly Prison, but way, way better. Because we're going to be putting more and more counters over time. We can kind of outpace whatever ramp if there's one problem creature. And also, this thing, if there's multiple opponents still left on the board, it just incentivizes our opponents to attack other people so that they can build up their board state with their mana. I like this thing. I wish it was a little cheaper though, but this is undoubtedly a very cool little piece of tech, especially in Miss Bumbleflower, who can put counters wherever the hell she wants. Oh, Varel of the Whole-Clade. Let's talk about Varel of the Whole-Clade. Varel of the Whole-Clade, I think we did a +1/+1 counter with... All right, let's talk about Varel of the Whole-Clade. He's a 3-drop, he's a legendary human merfolk 1/4, and he's got an activated ability where we pay Simic colors and we tap him, and we double the number of each kind of counter on target artifact creature or land. He's cool. Varel of the Whole-Clade was like the quintessential Simic +1/+1 counters commander if you didn't want to spend $20 on Prime Speaker Zagana. It's cool. It's a 1/4. It doubles the counters at a time. But I want to show you guys, we did a live deck tech on Zimone. There's a new Zimone, which is really just 2 Varel the Whole-Clades stapled together. Thank you guys so much for the 2,200 likes, by the way. And thank you, Manifesting Magic, for the heart. I am so sorry I missed it earlier. Yeah, let's talk about Zimone. Zimone's like a prominent character in Magic. Honestly, I'm here for it. This is the 2 Varoles of the Whole-Clade stapled together. It's a 4-drop, it's a 1/4, and at the beginning of combat on our turn, we put +1/+1 counter on each of up to 2 target creatures you control. That's great. Oftentimes, Simic +1/+1 strategies really struggle to put that first counter down to start doubling them up. And this thing will do it every turn because we get it at the beginning of each combat. And we can we can pay 2, tap Zimone, and we can double the number of each kind of counter on up to 2 target creatures, artifacts we control. So this thing can double up 2 creatures at a time. We are going to be doing multiple spells. We're in Miss Bumbleflower. We're going to have a wide board. And Miss Bumbleflower can make multiple things big, and Miss Zimone can double their bigness. Great. And also Miss Zimone will put out counters on her own trigger. Did anyone suggest a Noble Heritage? No, I like Noble Heritage. Noble Heritage. All right, so cons about Noble Heritage. It's wordy and it's hard to explain. But I really like Noble Heritage. It's a white spell. It's a background from the Baldur's Gate expansion. This 2-drop legendary enchantment background gives our commanders the ability excuse me, or they give them the trigger. When this creature enters the battlefield and at the beginning of your upkeep, each player may put 2+1/+1 counters on a creature they control. And for each opponent who does, you gain protection from that player until your next turn. It's great. We saw another white card like this earlier. I think it was the Orzhov Advocist, which is similar to this, but this feels better to me, honestly. Because it's a little less mana, and it puts it on our commander, which we're already going to want to have out anyway. 2 mana fits really great into a curve. This thing is another thing that people will use to make their Voltron commanders bigger, and then they'll forget that they can't attack you, and then you'll have to remind them, I made your thing thicker. Point it somewhere else. And then it's cool. I like it. It's techie. It's 60 cent. The art is also very cunty. I really like this card. All right. Shalehan. I'm sorry for butchering your name, but let's talk about Heliod Radiant Dawn. Heliod Radiant Dawn. Heliod Radiant Dawn, suggested by someone whose name is too difficult for me to say. I'm sorry. It's Heliod Radiant Dawn, 4-drop, mono white, in the Celestial foil, $3. This thing says whenever it enters the battlefield, returns are an enchantment you can from your. Excuse me. Let's see NTBs. Return an enchantment that ain't a god from your graveyard to your hand. You can also transform it into its Phyrexian version for 4 mana, and you may cast spells as though they had flash. Spells you cast cost 1 less to cast for each card your opponents have drawn this turn. It's cool. It's great. If we run enchantments, it can pull them out of the graveyard. It can't do it for gods. It's a great card. It came out in the March of the Machine expansion. We talked about Seedborn Muse and that Leyline of Anticipation a couple cards ago, and how good just giving your stuff flashes in general. Being able to hide your Boar State and be able to plop it down at instant speed, really cool move in Commander. And this thing will give your stuff flash and also make spells you cast cost 1 less to cast for each card your opponents have drawn this turn. So Miss Bumbleflower can force our opponents to draw. So this thing can be both flash and ramp for us. Also, Heliod looks so cool as a Phyrexian. I'm a nerd. I'm sorry. All right. Front side isn't great, but the flip, yeah, the flip is incredible, especially Miss Bumbleflower, who just needs value. Struggle for Project Purity. Struggle for Project Purity came out in the Fallout expansion. It's a 4-drop. It's a blue enchantment. It's a modal enchantment, so we get to pick what this thing does. When this thing enters the battlefield, we can choose Brotherhood or Enclave. If we choose the Brotherhood at the beginning of your upkeep, each opponent draws a card, and you draw a card for each card drawn this turn. That's the one. Pick that one. Or we can pick Enclave. Whenever a player attacks you with 1 or more creatures, that player gets twice that many rad counters. Pick the first one. You're going to draw oodles and boodles of cards off Project Purity. It's going to be absolutely disgusting. I love Project Purity. It is so good. Your opponents like it, so it doesn't draw removal. So your opponents are going to draw cards off it too. They were already going to draw cards off Miss Bumbleflower's triggers. So yeah, it's great. It's thematic. It's also Fallout, if that's a franchise you're attached to. All right, what else we got? All right, Bella Spectrace. Hey, Bella Spectrace, good to see you. Let's talk about a Web of Inertia. Web of Inertia. Web of Inertia. Web of Inertia is a 3-drop mono blue enchantment. At the beginning of each opponent's combat phase, that player may remove a card from his or her graveyard from the game. If that player doesn't, creatures he or she control can't attack you this turn. Okay, cool. So if our opponents don't have creatures exiled from our graveyard, they can't attack us. We can also run Rule of Law, which I'm sure is some kind of stacks piece that prevents people from targeting things in their graveyard, right? That's what that does. Rule of Law. Rule of Law. Yeah. Each player can't cast more than 1 spell each turn. Okay, cool. And then Web of Inertia did what? Let's do Web of Inertia. Web of Inertia. Okay, cool. So this thing just stops people from attacking us. They don't work together, to my knowledge. Let's try, what was the other one? Rule of Law. Each player can't cast more than 1 spell. All right. Oh, Rest in Peace. Rest in Peace is the stacks piece that turns off graveyard stuff, right? Yeah, when it enters the battlefield, exile graveyard as a card, return will be put into a graveyard from anywhere, exile it instead. It's cool. It's a low drop. The Assassin's Creed art for it looks actually especially spicy. The art's very cool. It's a stacks piece, so I'm going to poo-poo it. But it's pretty cool. It's a low drop. It fits good into our mana curve. We'll be able to get multiple spells off. This will fit really good into it. cool suggestion, but not for me. I am not Frost Ace. No. No, I'm sorry, Ketramos, the new Dawn. I don't. Is Ketramos? I think Ketramos is Orzhov. Ketramos is Orzhov, right? Yeah, Ketramos is Orzhov. Unfortunately, Moxfield won't pull off stuff outside of our color identity. Let's talk about a district mascot. District mascot is a card I'm not familiar with. Oh my god, but I should be. He's precious. Look at him. He's 1 mana. He fits into a curve so good. Oh, right. He's a 0/0. He's 50 cents. When this thing enters, you put a +1/+1 counter on it, and when you can activate it, you can remove 2 +1/+1 counters from this creature, and you can destroy target artifact. And whenever this creature attacks while saddled, you put a +1/+1 counter on it, and you saddle it for 1. People are going to ride this corgi, man. They're going to ride this dog, and they're going to put counters on it. I'm probably not going to ride the dog in Miss Bumbleflower because Miss Bumbleflower will slam counters on it all by herself. So, I don't really need... I don't know. Don't saddle the dog. Leave the dog alone. Look at him. He's precious. Also, he's 1 mana and he gets progressively more threatening. How fun is that? Also, we can remove counters from him to get rid of enchantments. Excuse me, get rid of artifacts. That's cool. He does a lot of value. He's also only 50 cents and he's beautiful. Falco Spara. Let's talk about Falco Spara. Falco Spara is the Bant commander. He was a precon. I think it was a precon from New Capenna. And... oh no, he was not a precon. He was just a mythic. He's a 4-drop Bant 3/3 flying trample, and when this thing enters the battlefield with the shield counter on it, you may look at the top card of your library, and you may cast spells from the top of your library by removing a counter from a creature you control, in addition to paying its other costs. This thing's great. This just is more card advantage for us. Honestly, we're going to be plopping down +1/+1 counters so easily with Miss Bumbleflower. We're going to take them off with Falco Sparrow to cast the top cards of our library, as if we haven't had enough card advantage in Miss Bumbleflower, getting that second spell trigger. Very good include. And also, he's very cheap. He's only $1. Hell yeah. Dream Demon wants us to run that Aether Siphon. Aether Siphon. Aether Siphon is not a card I'm familiar with, but it's a... okay, we got another Aether Drift card. We got a 40-cent vehicle. It is has start your engines. If you have no speed, it starts at 1. It increases 1 on each of your turns. Then an opponent loses life. Max speed is 4. We can pay 2. We can tap it to draw a card. Whenever you draw a card, each opponent mills 2 cards. If we got max speed. Okay, cool. We can use this thing to draw even more cards. And maybe mill our opponents one day. Forest Fruition? You want us to run that Forest Fruition? Forest Fruition. I think we saw Forest Fruition earlier. Yeah, we did. So let's talk about Forest Fruition. This thing is a 6-drop mono blue enchantment, and it says whenever an opponent casts a spell, that player draws 7 cards. Hits your opponents too. Helps your opponents draw cards. If you don't have no max hand size, I probably wouldn't put this on the battlefield, especially in Miss Bumbleflower, where you want to be casting multiple low drops to get her a trigger, to get you those 2 yummy cards. I don't know. I feel like you could easily draw yourself out with this thing. Maybe we're running a Thoracle. Maybe we're running dirty blue win cons. I don't know. This thing is definitely viable for those things. Also, it helps your opponents draw cards, which is on theme for Miss Bumbleflower. Also, it's only $1. You don't draw only wait. Whenever an opponent casts a spell, that player draws 7 cards. Oh no, I misread it. Who said that? You don't... Thank you, Pedro. I appreciate it. Yeah, it doesn't draw you cards. It only helps our opponents draw cards. Man, I misread that the first time like an hour ago. Whoopsie doodles. Thank you guys for saying something. I am so sorry, everybody else who I missed the first time. I must have missed people. Thank you, guys. Alright, guys. I'm getting a little bit tired. We're going to take a few more cards, and we're going to call it a night. Let's talk about Raised by Giants. Raised by Giants is a 6-drop, it's a background, it's a green enchantment, came out in the Baldur's Gate expansion, it's 50 cents. Commander creatures you control have base power, toughness 10/10, and are giants, in addition to their other types. It's cool, it's mono green, it makes your commander big and spicy. If we just, we cast a spell, we put a counter on Miss Bumbleflower, give it flying until end of turn. If it's already a 10/10, it's almost already there, a lethal threat if we swing at the same person twice. This thing will turn Miss Bumbleflower into a surprise Voltron commander all by itself, especially because Miss Bumbleflower can give herself flying. She can, right? I'm not misreading that, yeah. Yeah, on target creature. We can target Miss Bumbleflower, give her flying. Make her a flying 12/12 with her raised by giants. That's our number 5, thank you. All right. Dang, I like that blue card, Island. But it's good for decking out opponents. It is good for decking out opponents, Pedro. Polywog Prodigy. Let's talk about alternate win cons. Polywog Prodigy. Polywog Prodigy is a 2-mana mono blue frog wizard 1/3 with evolve. Whenever an opponent casts a non-creature spell with mana value less than this thing's power, we draw a card. It is not a May. This thing can help us draw a bunch of cards. We can put counters on it with Miss Bumbleflower, make it big, get those triggers, draw even more cards, maybe deck ourselves one day. Very cool. It is $13 for a reason. If you have any way to make this thing a little bit bigger, it can draw you a ton of cards in the commander game. It can probably draw us enough cards without our commander in the late game as long as we put some counters on it. Thank you very much for the follow. JBH the second, I appreciate it. I'm BGM, I'm a video editor and streamer, and I make silly little MTG videos all over the internet. Thanks for hanging out with me. If you want to see any of the cards we talked about tonight, please check out the Moxfield deck list in the link tree. If you want to hang out with gay nerds on the weekend and play Spell Table, which is paper magic over webcam, please join the Bigger Gayer Discord. We got suggested a Consecrated Sphinx for like the 4th time. Consecrated Sphinx is $43. It's very cool. It's a 6-mana card. It's a Sphinx. It can be a flying blocker if you need a flying blocker, or it can draw you large portions of your decks throughout the game. Because this thing says whenever an opponent draws a card, you may draw 2 cards. It can draw you all the cards you need to win a game. It is so good. I don't know if it's $40 good, but it is really good in Commander. Especially if it hangs out. Also, did I say it can be a flying blocker? Because it can be a flying blocker. Alright, Bonnie Paul. Bonnie Paul. Bonnie Paul. Bonnie Paul. Let's look at Bonnie Paul. Bonnie Paul. Clear Cutter. This is a reference to the American folk tale Paul Bunyan. This thing is a reaching 6/5. When it enters the battlefield, we create Bow, a legendary blue ox creature token with this creature's power and toughness are each equal to the number of lands you control. And whenever you attack, you draw a card, then you may put a land card from your hand or graveyard onto the battlefield. Bonnie came out in Thunder Junction. I think Paul Bunyan had a red ox. Please correct me if I'm wrong. It's cool. It's a reference to American folklore. And it can get us lands out of our graveyard, which, if you care about a landfall deck, is pretty good. Also, the cow is very cute and very magical looking in the background. Alright, guys, I think we're going to do one more. John, you draw 2 off every Bumbleflower. Yeah, you draw 2 after every Bumbleflower trigger off Miss Consecrated Sphinx. Let's go back. I missed that. Let's talk about it. Consecrated Sphinx. We're going to do one more card after we talk about Consecrated Sphinx again. Yeah, so Bumbleflower is forcing draws for our opponents, right? We are going to be drawing 2 cards for each of their 1 card, and then after we cast 2 spells. So, like, let's walk through it, right? We cast a spell with Consecrated Sphinx and Miss Bumbleflower on the board. We hand our opponents 1 card. We get 2 cards. We cast a second spell, get another 2 cards. We're up to 4 cards. They're up 2 cards. We get Miss Bumbleflower, and we've drawn 6 cards total. That's a lot of cards. That's why people keep suggesting Consecrated Sphinx. Consecrated Sphinx can likely draw you all the cards you need. Honestly, in Miss Bumbleflower, it goes ham so fast. Rising Waters. Let's talk about Rising Waters. Is it our last card of the day? We'll see how I feel when I see it. We gotta make sure the vibes are good. Rising Waters. Okay. Vibes are blue and old. 4 mana, mono blue enchantment, $2.50. Lands don't untap during their controller's untap step. The vibes are very bad. At the beginning of each player's upkeep, that player untaps a land. I hate this. I hate this. I hate this so much. Why are we doing this to people we like being around? That's just my personal take. I don't love effects like this. I don't like effects that stop people from playing the game or slow down the game so that we're the only one playing so that we can win outright. That's personally not my vibe. I'm not here to tell anybody how to play, but I'm going to tell you outright that I hate this, and I likely don't want to play if this is your idea of a good time. But yeah, it's $3, so if you want to upset your friends and let them watch them untap their lands really slowly Rising Waters. We're not stopping the live on that one. Let's get some positive vibes in here. Okay, let's talk about Agatha's Soul Cauldron. I don't know if Agatha's Soul Cauldron is quite positive vibes, but it is expensive vibes. It's a legendary 2-drop. It's $43. Excuse me, it's 50 American dollars, and you may spend mana as though it were mana of any color to activate abilities of creatures you control, and that's important because creatures you control with +1/+1 counters on them have all activated abilities of all creature cards exiled with this thing, and we can tap it to exile target card from a graveyard. When a creature card is exiled this way, we put a +1/+1 counter on target creature we control. Agatha's Soul Cauldron is a lot of things. It's graveyard hate, it's counter placement, and it's also tech by providing your creatures additional activated abilities. It's very cool, and on top of all of that, Artifact Storm decks want it because it's a low drop 2-mana artifact that actually can provide some sort of value. In Miss Bumbleflower, it's especially powerful because it places +1/+1 counters, so does Miss Bumbleflower, and the more things we have with +1/+1 counters on it, the more things we have with activated abilities from Agatha's Soul Cauldron. Alright guys, I'm having a little bit of chest congestion. I'm getting kind of tired. I want to thank you guys so much for hanging out with me tonight. Thank you for hanging out with me and suggesting cards from Miss Bumbleflower, our live deck tech. If you want to see any of the cards we talked about, check out the Moxfield profile. If you want to play Spell Table with gay people on the weekend, check out the Bigger Year Discord server. Thanks for hanging out with me today, guys. You can also check out the Moxfield page on the Linktree if you want to see any of the cards we talked about. I hope that you guys all have a great rest of your week.